or good evening, everyone. Welcome to the MIT ILP Digital Transformation Webinar Series. First of all, I wish you, your families, and your communities all the best in these challenging times. My name is Graham Rong. I'm a Director of Corporate Relations in MIT. MIT Corporate Relations serves as a chief gateway for industry to access to MIT and the MIT Connected Startups. Today, I'm your host of this third session of the Digital Transformation Webinar Series. As you know, in a rapidly expanding digital marketplace, every company needs digital transformation. The coronavirus crisis has accelerated the transition to a digital future. But what does digital transformation mean for your company and your business? How can we stay on the top of these rapid changes? Today's session will feature two researchers at MIT who focus on leadership in digital age and system dynamics. Their talks will focus on the pathways and the enablers to the digital business transformation. Each speaker will talk for 55 minutes, including questions and answers. So please ask questions, also vote on them. Here are a few notes on logistics. In addition to the session today, the webinar series can be, the details of the webinar series can be found on our website, ilp.mit.edu, under the Attend and then Webinar tab. All the sessions will be recorded, and the recording will be available on the same website. For those of you with your computer, at the bottom of your screen, you can see several buttons. Please use Q&A button to ask questions and also to vote on questions. Please do not use chat button to ask questions. Chat button is reserved for technical questions if you are having problems with the platform, etc. With that, let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Stephanie Woerner. She is a research scientist at the Center for Information Systems Research at MIT Sloan School of Management. Stephanie studies how companies use technology and data to create more effective business models and how they manage the associated organizational change. She is the co-author of a recent book, What's Your Digital Business Model? 6 Questions to Help You Build the Next Generation Enterprise. Her recent publications include Thriving in an Increasing Digital Ecosystem. Is your company ready for a digital future? And it pays to have a digitally savvy board. All in Slow Management Review. With that, let's turn this over to Stephanie.
Thank you, Graham. I'm so pleased to be here, and I'm going to share my screen now. So as Graham said, I'm Stephanie Woerner. I'm a research scientist at the MIT Sloan Center for Information Systems Research. We call our center CISR, and I'm here to talk to you about digital transformation. Digital transformation is not about technology. It's about change. And it's not whether that change is going to come, but it's a matter of when and how. In the new digital economy, many enterprises won't succeed by merely tweaking the management practices that have led to their past success. So to thrive in a digitized economy, businesses of all sizes will need to reinvent themselves and substantially change their organizations. And now is the perfect time to start reinventing your enterprise so that when conditions are better, you and your company are ready to take advantage of the opportunities. The Center for Information Systems Research was started in 1974 to help companies get value from information technology. Our mission has changed and evolved to now help large companies succeed in the digital economy. We're a global research center. We do research for practitioners, and we have approximately 90 sponsors and patrons. We do approximately 8 to 10 projects per year. You can see on the side our listing of our 2020 projects, and I invite you to visit our website and explore our research and download and share it with your colleagues. So, what is the goal for most companies in the digital economy? It is to become future ready. So, what is future ready? A future ready company is one that is both innovative and low cost, has great customer experience, is modular and agile, is creating components that can be plugged and played into your own platform and into your partners' platforms. In a future-ready company, data is a strategic asset. These companies have consolidated all of their data. They have a single source of truth for their customers. They have a single source of truth for their operations. And their ecosystem's ready. They're ready to participate not in a linear value chain, but instead in a network of relationships with suppliers and partners and customers. But where are most companies? We find that most companies are in what we call silos and spaghetti. These are product-driven companies, and they have a complex landscape of processes, systems, and data. So there are lots of silos throughout the whole organization. The company has grown up over time, and instead of consolidating and integrating, they've wired the silos together. It works, but it often works because these companies are relying on the heroics of their people. There are other forms of transformation. We see two other ones in our research. The first is what we call industrialized. We see a lot of companies that have focused on becoming operationally efficient, that they have increased their automation, standardization, they've become great at reuse, and really working on their productivity. We call these companies industrialized. These companies have great APIs and they plug and play their products and services easily. As I said, they have service enabled their crown jewels. They know what they're really best at, what their core competencies are, and they've put those together with APIs so that they can open them up for both internal innovation and for sharing with their partners. They have one best way to do each key task. So for instance, in a bank, they're going to have one way to onboard a customer rather than multiple ways of onboarding a customer. And as I said previously around Future Ready, these are companies that have consolidated their data and they have a single source of truth. Other companies, as part of their transformation, have really become much more outward facing, looking at their customers and really deciding that they have to focus on their customer experience. We see a lot of banks and we see a lot of retail companies in this quadrant. And what happens here is these companies have often put a wrapper around their systems. And so the customer gets a simulated, integrated experience, but the complex operations still exist in the back end. For instance, you often would see, you might see a telecom company that has a quad play offer, and if they have not integrated and they have not put these things together on their platform, you'll see that the quad play will be offered as one solution, but when the customer goes to implement the quad play, they're going to have to talk to the telephone division, the internet division, the cable division, and it only looks like it's a single integrated solution. It's really in the back end, those four. A lot of these companies have a strong design and user experience capabilities, and they often spend a lot of time on a rich mobile experience. But Most companies, what they're trying to do when we talk to them about their digital transformations is they're trying to become ambidextrous, really doing both operational efficiency and customer experience at the same time. And we have, in our research, we've been looking at what firms are future ready. And if you look at the data that we collected in our 2019 survey, we found that 51% of firms were in silos and spaghetti. Future ready firms were 22%, 7% were industrialized, and integrated experience was 20%. But future ready firms, this is where you really want to be. These are the firms that have the best profit margin and revenue growth. So what we did is we industry adjusted. So all of these numbers are compared to industry. And as you can see, future ready firms have the best profit margin. They have a profit margin that is 19.3 percentage points above their industry average. Whereas you take a real hit in silos and spaghetti with that complex landscape of processes and systems. And there, those companies have a profit margin that is 7.9 percentage points below industry average. Now, this doesn't mean that they're not profitable. It just means that they're not operating as profitably as companies that have started to make the move toward future ready. We see some of the same patterns toward revenue growth. Future ready firms have a revenue growth that is almost 27 percentage points above industry average. And silos and spaghetti firms have a revenue growth that is almost 12 percentage points below. Now, what's interesting here is you can see as you move toward industrialized, you actually get a lift in both your profitability and your growth. And that is what having a platform does for you. It means that you've integrated some discipline into the way that you do business, and you start to see a movement toward profitability and growth. In integrated experience, we're not surprised at seeing the reduction off of industry average profitability, because those firms are not focusing as much on their operational efficiency, but are instead really looking for lifts in their customer experiences and the associated revenue growth that you will see with that. So how do you get to future ready? We have identified 4 pathways, and each of these pathways can be successful. And what I'm going to do now is describe the 4 pathways in some depth, and I'll use an example for each pathway. And then later on in the talk, we will talk about one of the firms in more detail. So the first pathway, pathway 1, takes a company through industrialized. And if you remember back where in the previous slide where we looked at the quadrants, industrialized was where companies are focusing on operational efficiency. They're really increasing their automation. They've created modules that they can reuse. They've standardized many of their processes so that they have one key way to onboard a customer, one key way to deliver an invoice, one key way to pay an invoice. And for that, they're really focusing on productivity, not focusing as much on customer experience. The real issue with this pathway is it's often a long, hard slog with not a lot of customer input. And because of the focus on the platform, sometimes these companies forget to figure out what it is the customer is looking for, and they don't know how to engage the customer as well. We see a lot of manufacturing firms on this pathway. One of the firms that we studied, Tetra Pak, has really spent years focusing on its process management and their master data. And what they've done now is they've started to turn the corner and have started thinking about, well, how are they going to use this competitive advantage in process and this capacity of that they've delivered or developed because of their data management to start to engage their customers. And they're starting to think about how they can deliver an end-to-end solution to their customers. The second pathway is one that goes up through integrated experience. We see a lot of firms, again, banking, retail, where they're under a fair amount of threat because of customers who have become used to seeing great technology in the customer, with their Google search and with how easy it is to do business in an e-commerce way. And so a lot of these firms that are bricks and mortar have decided that they have to focus on their customer experience, and they want to really increase their measurement. They want to increase their NPS score. So they do things to move them toward this integrated experience, toward this great experience, but without really integrating those kinds of things into their platform. And so instead of becoming more efficient, what we often see in this pathway is that you're adding another silo, you're increasing your NPS score, but you're not really moving toward more productivity. And at some point, the company looks and says, my God, we have got to become more efficient, and they turn a corner. Cemex, which we'll talk about a little bit later, had spent years working on their safety and working on their process, becoming able to replicate when they opened new plants what they had done before in previous plants, but they realized that they had not been engaging their customers, and they thought that they had an opportunity to really create a competitive advantage if they started to engage them. So they developed a digital suite that helps construction managers, and have in the process really transformed the way that, one, they've done business, and two, the expectations of their customers. The third pathway is an incremental pathway. It's one where you have a company is not under a lot of threat. They have both reasonable operational efficiency and reasonable customer experience, and they've decided that they don't want to commit themselves toward only focusing on the efficiency or the experience, but instead want to do it in a stair-step manner. So this iterative approach means that you'll say, for instance, a company will decide to say, put into place a mobile app. But from there, they're then going to integrate the operations from that mobile app into their platform. And then, for instance, like Schneider Electric, they will decide to consolidate all of their customer data, and they will develop a CRM. And then the next step will be to simplify some of their back end. And through those steps, they're going to go up toward future ready. One of the real problems with this pathway is that it's hard on your employees, and it will they don't know what the end goal is. And so it is incumbent upon leaders here to have a great roadmap so that they can keep going. KPN, a Netherlands telecom company, took this iterative approach, and along the way, by focusing both on customer experience and on their operational efficiency, delivered 570 million euros in savings and a net promoter score increase of 20 points. And then finally, we have the pathway 4. And this is where a company throws up their hands and says, we can't get to future ready with what we have. It is just impossible. And so they start a new business unit, or they start a new company altogether. And here is one where they just leave the legacy behind. They put into place future-ready systems, and they have a great customer experience out of the box. Domain, a company in Australia, created a mobile-centric platform. They actually started as a business unit of Fairfax Media. And as you know, local newspapers have really been hit hard. Fairfax Media decided that they could not really develop this future-ready solution, this future-ready business with what they had. So they created a mobile-centric platform, Domain, and it's a go-to destination for the entire property journey. And when they IPO'd it, they unlocked an additional $750 million Australian dollars in additional value. And along the way, on every path, there are explosions, big disruptions to the way that business has been done in the past that every company is going to have to manage. And I've been told that there are questions, and so now I'm going to open it up for questions where we are right now.
Stephanie, the first question is if digital transformation is not about technology, can enterprise transform successfully without the change or support from technology?
Oh no, they will have to have technology. It's not that, it's just that if you look at the big issues, which we're going to discuss later in this presentation, only one of them is really about technology. The other three are about governance, decision rights, how are people working, cultural types of issues, and restructuring. So technology is part of a digital business transformation, but it is not, you're not going to get to a digital business transformation only with technology.
Right. Another question here is, what are some impediments and challenges companies run into that prevents them from transitioning to future ready?
So
To avoid.
We'll talk about those later in the presentation. Those are the explosions that I talked about. And if a company can't manage those explosions or control those explosions, they're going to have a great difficulty in proceeding along to their future ready state.
Great. Next one. It is hard for companies to get to future ready, as it is difficult, especially to move large organizations to change. What are the generic features of future ready companies that got them there?
Generic. So although I said it was not about technology, it certainly is about using the technology in a structured way. It's also about being disciplined. I would say that discipline is going to be one of the key things that you're going to bring to a digital business transformation. I think that we'll address this question in more detail as we move along. There are certainly leadership issues. There are talent issues all around moving from a silos and spaghetti to a future ready. Part of it is just even creating a common language and creating a common goal that everybody in the company knows where they want to get to.
We have one more question and you can continue.
Great.
Pathway 1 and the Pathway 4 could exist in one organization?
Absolutely. So, in fact, I'm going to address that in the next slide. And why don't I go to the next slide and start to talk about that? But what we do see is, especially in large companies that have multiple business units, we often see multiple pathways where you run into problems And one of the problems is if you have one business unit and multiple pathways, very difficult. Your employees are not going to know what to do.
Thank you, Stephanie.
So which of the pathways are the most popular? And apropos of the previous question, can a company be on multiple pathways? And if they're on multiple pathways, are they well-coordinated pathways? Are these, when I say well-coordinated, I mean, are your leaders looking across the two pathways, seeing which things are common, which things can be leveraged for each of the pathways, or are they multiple pathways and not coordinated? So if we look at which ones are most popular, you'll see that it's really a tie between Pathway 1 and Pathway 3. And Pathway 4 is unusual because it's one where you have to have an idea that's going to need a new business unit. We do see companies, 12% of the companies are following multiple pathways well coordinated. So as the previous questioner asked, could you do a Pathway 1 and a Pathway 4? Absolutely. We've talked to several companies, for instance, one bank that decided what they were going to do is to keep working along with their regular businesses, a Pathway 1. They've got a platform. They're going to start leveraging the platform. They're going to keep moving along, creating modules and reuse, but at the same time, they have a great idea for a new business. So they started a new business unit and they're using a Pathway 1 and a Pathway 4. One of the real issues with a Pathway 4 is how do you get the learnings from a future-ready company back into into your, say, Pathway 1 company. And then we have 10% of the companies are following multiple pathways, but they're not coordinated. And then if you look to see how complete these companies are, on average, companies are 50% complete. And where you see that discipline really showing up is under multiple pathways well coordinated. It's difficult to have 2 pathways in a firm or 3 pathways. And if you're well coordinated, that's just a sign that you've got that discipline. And you can see that those companies are close to 60% complete. Whereas if you don't have that discipline, which shows up in that multiple not coordinated, you can see that they're only a third of the way along. And in our research, we found that it really took almost 2 years before companies saw measurable results in their digital business transformation. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a poll. And what I want to find out is how far along is your enterprise on its transformation journey? And then I want to talk about why it matters how far along you are. So the poll is open, and let's see what you have to say. What we have is, looks like the majority of the firms are really less than 40% complete. So about 60% of our audience is less than 40% complete. And wow, if we were in person, I would love to talk to the enterprise that is more than 80% complete, the enterprises that are more than 80% complete. I bet you have some great stories to tell. And I'm sure that some of the firms that are further along would have a lot of advice that they could impart to other companies that are in this webinar. So I'm going to go back to my slides. And so here is why moving toward completion is good for your bottom line. If you look at companies that are less than 30% complete, you can see that they take a real hit toward the revenue growth and their net profit margin. This goes back to that silos and spaghetti, that complexity of landscape and processes that are make it difficult for you to get efficiencies, make it difficult for your people to get work done. As you move along toward completion, up to the 50% mark, you're still not seeing the revenue growth. You haven't figured out exactly how to take those modules that you've put together, those components, and then make them into new integrated solutions. But those companies are moving along and profitability is starting to appear. And then when you get into the top third, where the average is 77 complete, that's where you start to see real gains in revenue growth and in net margin. But one of the things, these pathways are quite different. They're quite different in what you emphasize, especially in the beginning. They're different in where you're going to make the turning points. But one of the things is they all pay off. So as the previous slide showed, in this one, when we looked at firms that were above and below 50% complete, if you can reach that 50% mark, and that's, I think, a goal that we at MIT Scissor really start to push to our sponsors and patrons, is really strive toward that 50% mark, because you start to see big differences in the margin and the growth. Now, there are differences. This is a Harvey Ball diagram, and what we have done is looked at which pathways have the highest margin and growth, and we've compared the other pathways to that pathway. So pathway 4 is best on both margin and growth. And in part, that's because you've started a new company, a new business unit. It's already future ready. They get there a whole lot faster than the other companies do. And what you can see is pathway 1 does very well on both margin and growth compared to pathway 4. That discipline of creating your platform, of wringing everything out of that platform that you need to, is very good. Pathway 2 is really good for growth. And pathway 3, the stair steps incremental, is really kind of in between. They're all profitable when you are moving toward the 50% mark. It's just that you get there faster with a pathway 4. Now, here is where we're going to talk about these impediments that people asked about earlier in the talk. And becoming future ready requires explosions. And we've identified 4 different kinds of explosions. The first explosion is one around decision rights. We have found one of the hardest things for firms to do is to get the right people to lead key decisions. So, for instance, who is going to be responsible for what gets done versus how it gets done? And in most companies in this digital age, we really see a breaking apart of the what versus how. Who's going to be responsible for okaying off-path spend? One of the big issues around a successful transformation is staying focused, staying disciplined, and your spend has got to track that pathway that you're on. So if you have decided that you are on a pathway 1, but you're spending 50% of your investment on, say, customer offers, which looks like a pathway 2, you're not going to get very far on your pathway 1. Who's going to be responsible for addressing the concerns of, say, business units in your organization? We are different. We need something different. We're not going to be on that platform because we have different needs. Somebody has got to have the responsibility, has got to have the authority to say, tell me how you're different. Are you sure that we can't use this platform and then just customize around the edges? The second explosion is new ways of working. We are finding that changing the culture is very difficult in a digital business transformation. And new ways of working is one of the ways that you start to see this change in the culture. Most firms that we know, that we've been talking to, have really been looking at agile methodologies of doing much more iterative development, bringing the customer voice in early, much earlier in terms of their products and solutions, becoming much more evidence-based. So instead of relying on gut instinct, looking at creating hypotheses and then going out and getting the data to see if the hypotheses are really found out to be true or not. Also, are they creating metrics and dashboards to reflect those metrics so that they can keep track of how they're doing in real time? That new way of working is quite challenging. It's challenging to the established leadership of the company, because a lot of those new ways of working really require devolving authority down to the people who are closer to the work. And that is often very hard, especially in moving, say, from a command and control type of leadership to a coach and communicate. Here is where the technology comes in. You have to have a platform mindset. You're not going to get very far in a digital economy without a platform. Have you connected your organizational silos? Thinking about reuse. Peter Weil and I did a project, probably 8 to 10 years ago, looking at reuse. And reuse was really important in terms of freeing up investment to create new opportunities, more innovation. It was also really good for time to market. In developing this platform mindset, you have to know, what are your core capabilities? Are you able to service enable them with APIs? And then you have to make a decision, and this goes back to the decision rights of, are you going to use those internally, or are you going to open them up to the world and see if you can get this more platform-based innovation? And then finally, there's organizational surgery. And we call it organizational surgery rather than reorganization because it is often really invasive, it's difficult, and we wanted to get that across. And in fact, we use the word explosions because that's what it feels like to people in the organization. It feels like their world has exploded. So organizational surgery is around removing the organizational complexity and reducing the alignment challenges. When we've talked to companies about these explosions, we often see the companies that are furthest along have delayed doing the organizational surgery until later. They first do often what we see first is in a successful transformation is a focus on the decision rights, and then working on new ways of working and platforms. And then finally, when there's a real need for addressing the alignment, then doing the organizational surgery. Although we have talked to companies like DBS Bank that really wanted to avoid the organizational surgery. They didn't see that they needed to do that. They may have taken a little bit longer to go and create alignment, but they really didn't want to do a reorganization. And in dealing with explosions, we asked companies, how effectively are you dealing with decision rights? And we see that on average, companies are dealing with decision rights, they're about 50%, about average. But if you're a top performer, and we defined a top performer as a company that was in the top quartile of firms on profitability, and that is adjusted for industry. And those top performers are much more effective at dealing with decision rights. In new ways of working, companies are better. The average company is better than average at new ways of working. I think that working on agile methodologies, on this iterative way of doing work, of using data, more evidence-based decision-making, we're starting to see companies become more comfortable with it and become more effective. Top performers are quite effective, really at 73%. Platform mindset, not quite as good as new ways of working, but still quite good. I think that this is technologies. People have known that they've had to develop they have to develop a platform. They're going to need one to really be successful in the digital economy. My colleague Jeannie Ross has been working on platforms for many years, and companies who think and have a platform mindset have less spaghetti. They really have thought seriously about how to create end-to-end processes, and that efficiency is kind of reflected in how effective you can be at that. And then finally, organizational surgery on average, it's right there with decision rights. These are often really difficult leadership challenges. How are you going to reorganize the organization? And how are you going to designate who is going to be in charge of what? And so these top performers are really quite a bit better at that. And we think that that has contributed to their ability to become more profitable. So let's do a short case study. I'd like to talk about Cemex. And Cemex is a building materials company headquartered in Monterrey, Mexico. It manufactures and distributes, markets cement, ready-mix concrete, aggregates, and other building materials in over 50 countries. It spent years improving its operations for global efficiencies, and they have a strong reputation for quality, safety, and material innovation. And what is interesting about Cemex is for their digital transformation, however, they, instead of doing a path one transformation, which might have really been in line with the way that they had dealt with issues in the past, they embarked on a pathway two journey, using new technology, new technological developments to reinvent their customer experience. And this priority shift toward customer centricity was made in 2014 when their newly appointed CEO, Fernando Gonzalez, made it a part of the company's new direction. So I'm going to tell this story through the decision rights. So through the four explosions, and how they were handled. So the first one is on decision rights. So the CEO's decision regarding their company's priorities was first among the changes that they made. So really starting to think seriously about how you're going to move a very large company in 50 countries a long way toward customer centricity. So this directly affected their funding and project approvals throughout Cemex. And in fact, we were told that basically it really froze the budgets. Unless they had a project that dealt directly with safety, they really put all of their funding initiatives toward customer experience. While the CEO, Fernando, was fully involved in the digital business transformation, he didn't lead it himself. He first delegated to 3 separate heads of digital, and then as the transformation gained importance, he moved this responsibility to shared ownership by the executive committee. In terms of new ways of working, the executive committee recognized that true customer experience improvements require greater autonomy for digital development teams, along with moving toward agile ways of development. This was really a big change for Cemex, and they found it quite difficult to come to terms with. The executive committee and senior executives were really quite used to saying what had to be done and then overseeing it. With these agile ways of development, they really had to let the people who were close to the work, who were iterating, take much more authority for it And it meant that leaders had to just put a goal out there and, again, coach and communicate, but be much more hands-off about the ways of working. They created blended learning and development programs. Employees were engaged in the new strategic direction. Particularly important was the development of a digital mindset, which comprised 5 agile components. There was a focus on customer centricity and customer journeys. We see this a lot in the transformations that we have studied. They had iterative work processes. They worked a lot on collaborative work habits that transcended their silos and hierarchies. They had a test and learn environment that fostered experimentation, and they embraced continuous change. So this whole digital mindset supported a discovery process where employees themselves now went out and conducted interviews with customers. They did panel discussions. They used customer surveys to identify customer pain points in dealing with CEMEX. Very different way of working than they had done in the past. In terms of a platform mindset, CEMEX's senior leadership team aligned the company's customer-facing efforts toward a single platform, CEMEX Go. So CEMEX, this platform focused on simplifying and streamlining customer interactions with the company. Customers referred to CEMEX Go as a one-stop shop, a platform that allowed them to seamlessly place, schedule, and adjust orders. They track the delivery trucks in real time when they left CEMEX facilities, and to manage the invoices and payments. And in fact, this tracking then goes back to new ways of working, because in the past, CEMEX could tell a customer, yes, we've sent the truck out, but customer didn't know where it was. Well, now customers know where the truck is, and they can follow the truck as it goes to the job site. And it meant that at that point, you had to have better communication. So that meant you developed platform processes that were going to communicate back and among all of the pieces of the manufacturing process. And it meant that you could know, you were much more open to the customer, and really you were responsible to the customer. And then finally, the global rollout of CEMEX Go required a lot of standardization of the processes, solutions, and formally the IT shadow efforts. So organizational surgery facilitated the standardization by splitting the IT department into a digital enablement unit, which was customer-facing projects, analytics, and the digital capabilities program, and a global IT operations unit, which comprised the data center, the sourcing partnerships, and the operational backbone. And these units also introduced new job functions, for instance, advanced global analytics and user experience and design, and a new local customer experiences offices to consolidate local customer priorities. So this goes back also to the decision rights, where they decided that they were going to have these global IT operations, and they weren't going to allow countries to say, but we're different. They could customize around the edges to address those local customer needs, but in general, they were all going to use the same platform. So these organizational changes meant that CEMEX Go could grow beyond its original customer-facing goals. Since its launch about 2 years ago, CEMEX Go has achieved 96% global recurring customer adoption. Customers loved it. They couldn't wait to have it. And now processes more than 45% of the company's total global sales. So it's been a really big success, and it's really transformed the way that CEMEX has worked. I mean, they have now really folded in customer experience into what they do and become much more of a future-ready company. So In summary, to redesign for the future, you first need to agree on your pathway. And this is going to be important for a couple of things. It means that you're going to have a common language throughout the organization. And it means it's going to focus your efforts. You're going to know more about what you're doing, and it helps keep people on track. And you're going to need to anticipate the impact of the explosions and figure out how you're going to manage them. Every transformation that we have studied has had these 4 explosions, but how the company manages the explosion is really important to how far along they get in their transformation. And that is how you progress to future ready. Any questions?
Yes, Stephanie, there are many questions. Let me just, first question here. How are business leaders qualifying the value return from digital transformation?
Well, I know that some of the first things that business leaders talk about is what's the return on investment. And I have to say we have not really looked at return on investment specifically, but we certainly have been able to show that there's this increase in profitability and this increase in revenue growth. And we see it among firms that we've studied. The best firms really become fundamentally changed. And so I think it depends on what the company is trying to accomplish. Are they looking for growth? Well, if you're looking for growth, you're going to not only focus on this efficiency and this customer experience, but you're also going to be looking at the partnerships that you need to make so that you can offer, say, complementary services. If you're looking for profitability, that's really more of a focus on efficiency. The modularity, componentization becomes really important, and the ability to go and mix and match and plug and play those components. So it kind of depends on what the goal is.
Thank you. Next question. By the way, a number of audiences actually asked about the KPI and the measurement. So I just merged them together. It's like one quick question is how to measure the digital transformation maturity?
Maturity. So we're starting to, we have some indications of maturity. So one is you can measure your maturity. You can look at efficiency and you can look at customer experience compared to your competitors. You can also think about your profitability and your revenue growth as, say, a proxy for how good you are compared to your competitors. There are measurements around how far along you are in your transformation, so you can use some of the numbers in this presentation. We've also started to look at how well prepared your top management team is for transformation, which is research that we're doing right now. So I think it depends on what the final goal is, and are you looking for end measurement like profitability, revenue growth, market cap valuation? Are you looking for intermediate measures? And we've started to look at that. One measurement, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. So for instance, DBS Bank decided that the way that they would know if they had succeeded was, could they make a substantial difference in the number of hours that customers saved. So they had a real customer focus, and they started tracking how many hours customers saved as a result of, say, new customer journeys, as a result of efficiencies. A company like Schneider Electric decided that the way that they could tell if they were succeeding was how much were they increasing their cross-selling. So it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of your metric. You really have to decide what you're moving toward and what's the goal of your transformation, and then find a metric that really starts to track that.
Thank you. Another question, this this participant is from government sector. How does a government agency, for instance, the Department of Education, become future ready? Does the change come from internal or external, or both?
Both. I'm going to say, so one of the real issues around government agencies is they have a funding model that is often changes from year to year. And so they are fundamentally, they just have more difficulties, but they're going to be both internal and external. So think about what you could do pretty easily. And I'm going to say that kind of, it's not easy, but certainly you could start with new ways of working as a lever into it, and possibly even decision rights. The technology, it's quite likely that you would want outside partners to help. We see a lot of firms using outside partners to help them with the technology, sometimes even helping with developing and dealing with the organizational change. So I think that government agencies could have a slower transformation. I can look in my data to see where government agencies, where they're moving along. We're doing a paper right now on some not-for-profits, and those companies are just not as far along as some in the for-profit sector. But I think there are ways to move toward future ready, especially around using the new ways of working.
Next one is interesting. It's probably from one of those like 80% done with the transformation. So let me just this thing. So if a company has arrived to the future ready state, how do they make sure they keep their competitive advantages? And what's next?
Well, what we've seen is, I mean, we define future ready, but it does mean that something new, some new technologies are always going to be coming up. There's going to be new ways of working that are going to be coming. People are going to get better at, there's going to be new sources of data. So I think what's incumbent upon these companies that are already future ready is really staying attuned to the external environment, seeing what is out there, figuring out how they can bring that and integrate it into their own platform and then leverage it. What we've seen with companies is that this is not an end state. It really is a journey. And most companies that we've talked to realize it's a journey. They're trying to move themselves toward future ready, but they know that once they get there, they can't afford to rest. They always have to be thinking about what's the next step that they're going to take.
Yeah, depending on it's really ready on just they think it's ready. Next question, I think, is from a developing country. I think the digital transformation readiness of enterprise depends on their country's infrastructure, the working culture, and encouragement, and the support from government and the regulatory readiness. Do you have any suggestion for enterprises from developing countries? What should they do to digitize their businesses effectively?
I think that that is a good summary of what the importance of regulation. However, regulation and institutional environment is going to be in place also for developed countries. I mean, if you look at banking, the regulatory environment is still very important, and they just have to deal with it. A future-ready company really just takes compliance as a capability that they have to develop. So what can you do with it, about it? There's certainly external efforts that you can do in terms of talking and lobbying the government. Internally, I don't think that you can wait for the government. You really need to start thinking about, again, these new ways of working, putting into place a platform. What can you leverage? Who can you partner with? So you may not be able to do it all on your own, but we do find, say, in ecosystems, and if your country is operating more in an ecosystem environment, who can you partner with? That's going to give you a lot of capability to move forward. I have to say we haven't done as much work because our sponsor in developing countries, because our sponsors are typically big old companies, but we do see it in the data, and partnering becomes very important.
Certainly, Stephanie, your speech has inspired lots and lots of questions. We don't have time to answer all of them. And I'm sure there are opportunities in the future, especially if they come to MIT or work with ILP. They will have opportunities to interact with some researchers like Stephanie. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for the excellent talk.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to have been a part of this.
Thank you.